Okay, this is the people in the Bible historical? Is there anything that you would like to say, Sylvester, before we begin?
I think that should be good.
All right, let's begin and see what this person has to say.
What's up, guys? This is A.G. Pollard, and we want to get straight to the point of this video. None of the people mentioned in the Bible actually existed. That's right, you heard me correctly. There is no historical evidence whatsoever that any of the figures mentioned in the Bible actually existed. See, those people were all made up. It was all just allegory. It was mythology. It's kind of like sun worship, because Holy Bible actually means Heliopolis Biblicus, which means the sun book. So it was all just metaphor about sun worship and astrotheology. The Jewish priests made it up. Or maybe it was Constantine, Nicaea. It was probably the Pope. Now, all of that stuff was just made up by the Vatican, the Illuminati. Now, wait. Before you turn this video off, no, I have not gone off on the deep end. Listen, if you have not already heard this argument made before, consider yourself blessed, because this argument has been making a lot of traction around social media, in videos, in memes, and the usual little outlets for things like this to get out. What we want to do in this video is just to take a few minutes to consider the fact, could this argument have any validity to it? Did the people in the Bible actually exist or not? Well, that's what we're here to talk about today. Does the claim that the people mentioned in the Bible never existed hold water? Is there any weight to that argument whatsoever? Well, thankfully, because of archaeology and history, original source documentation, the answer to that question is an emphatic no. According to Jane Cahill of Hebrew University, the most frequently voiced argument by those who challenge the historical existence of the United Monarchy, that is, the kingdoms of David and Solomon, is the supposed lack of archaeological evidence. In most cases, these arguments are either grossly misleading, illogical, disingenuous, or all three. Look, the question boils down to this. Is there any evidence to support the idea that biblical figures actually lived and breathed in history just like you and I do? Thankfully, there are literally mountains of evidence to prove that that is exactly the case. And keep in mind here, we're not talking about taking a verse from the Bible to try to prove the Bible.
So I'm going to stop there for a second. There is a lot of problems with what's being talked about here when he's talking about the idea that these people are historical. And the problem is, like, you have people like Nebuchadnezzar, Cyrus, and so on and so forth, that are acknowledged to have existed, but this doesn't necessarily prove that the Bible is historical in the way that it narrates it. Do you get my point?
Yes, I do.
The story is still very different from what is being talked about in the Bible. And if you look at the Chaldean captivity, otherwise known as the Babylonian captivity, it's very obvious what happened in that situation. The Israelites, they were copying the Mesopotamian stories, and they created the book of Genesis, wrote the book of Genesis based on those myths, because they were reading those stories during the captivity, and they were putting this together as such. You follow me?
Yes.
And that's something that that people need to look at. Is there anything you want to say before we continue on that note?
No, we keep going.
All right.
We're talking about sources from outside of the Bible, extra biblical sources that perfectly correspond to the biblical narrative. For example, we have Tel Der Allah, the inscription that was discovered that talks about Balaam, the exact same Balaam that was mentioned in the book of Numbers. This is an ancient inscription from outside of the Bible that corresponds to a person that's mentioned right there in the Bible. So just from that one example, the whole argument that nobody from the Bible ever lived is totally destroyed. But
I'm going to stop there again. Just because you found an inscription that apparently parallels something that has been mentioned in the Bible does not actually prove that the story surrounding it has any validity to it. What do you think about this?
That's kind of like a good analogy. That's kind of like saying, based on the video we did with Alton Sterling, when he was discussing this guy Alton Sterling that was on Kevin Wesley's last year. He said that in somewhere in time there was a stone plaque named Pontius Pilate, and the only references to Pontius Pilate in the Bible, so that means that Pontius Pilate existed. It's like you can't find things that you see like outside like that, and just because it's mentioned in the Bible, that means that the validity of that is true. That's kind of like me saying, oh well, that's like me using New York City, for example, to prove that Spider-Man exists. You see my point?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
He's trying to personify something like that proves the Bible to be true, which in case it's really not.
Because the thing is that it's very obvious that the Bible has been copied from multiple different stories, merged together, including multiple different events that were mythicized, if you will, like especially different historical figures that were kind of merged together into one person. There's a lot to that people are not paying attention to. But anyway, without further ado, let's continue.
Let's keep going. We also have 51 clay seals that were hardened by the fire that the Babylonians used when they came into Jerusalem to destroy it in the 6th century BC. Now, the same fire that they tried to use to destroy the city actually worked to preserve the little clay seals that were used on the official documents signed by the princes and the nobles and the people in high position. One of the seals has spelled on it the name of one of the people mentioned in the Bible. His name was Baruch. If you flip over to the back of that seal, you can still see Baruch's fingerprint on that piece of clay. Out of the 51 clay seals that were discovered, 26 of them perfectly correspond by name to people who were mentioned in the Bible. And we also have the Amarna letters that were written by a Canaanite king asking one of the pharaohs for assistance when he said that the Apiru or the Hapiru people were coming and destroying Jerusalem. That word Apiru perfectly corresponds with the word Hebrew. And of course, I've heard so many people in the conscious community, they'll ask the question, well, where are the bodies? If all those people live, where are the bodies? I always wondered, what's the fascination with dead bodies?
Don't want to see a dead body.
But the reason why that question is irrelevant is because we actually know where many of the tombs and burial places of biblical figures are to this very day. For example, there's the tomb of the prophets where several of the minor prophets were buried. We also know where the tombs of David and Solomon are. We also have the ossuary or the bone box of Caiaphas. Now think about this for a second. This is the same Caiaphas as mentioned in the New Testament.
So I'm going to stop there. Another problem that, again, people do not pay attention to is that mythology tends to have a lot of background to it. Any mythology, doesn't matter what it is, historically, but it doesn't really prove that the story it is narrating in itself has any validity to it, despite that fact. So, what's your take on this?
Can you repeat that again?
I was saying, a lot of mythological stories tend to have a lot of historical background to them, but it doesn't necessarily mean nor prove that the validity of the story being narrated in those myths. You follow me?
Yes.
Because it looks like this this guy is trying to use all these different evidence. Like he's trying to talk about burial sites, tombs, and locations of different people in the Bible that were apparently found, which, by the way, there's a lot of controversy around that idea, because it's another thing is, another example of this is, for example, you know how the Noah's Ark apparently was found multiple times And each time,
Yeah.
it wasn't actually Noah's Ark. It was just, like the only one that still, and this is like stretching it, by the way, that caught some attention was the one that was found in, if I remember correctly, in Turkey, but that still doesn't really prove anything. Another problem is, we know that if you look at the Epic of Gilgamesh, it has a story of the flood. Utnapishtim builds a boat, puts the animals and himself inside it and his family, and he saves himself from the flood. It wasn't a global flood, by the way. It was a river flood. So, even the one that was being talked about in Turkey doesn't hold any water, because the one that's talked about in the Epic of Gilgamesh is older than the flood myth in the Book of Genesis, which usually scholars and historians agree that the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Tanakh, was written during the captivity and was finalized at least after the captivity was over with. Some of the finalization may have occurred during the captivity. It only goes to show that they really did copy the Mesopotamian myths during the captivity. So, despite the fact that captivity actually happened, it actually contradicts divine inspiration, because it actually shows that the plagiarism of the Mesopotamian text did take place, and we know when it took place and why. So is there anything else you would like to talk about before we continue? Sylvester? Sylvester, can you hear me? Can you hear me? I can't hear you at all. Sylvester, I'm not hearing anything. Hold on. I'm just gonna see if I can fix this sound problem. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to fix up the video, but we can continue nonetheless.
As one of the men that served as high priest while Jesus Christ was being tried and crucified. And we actually have the box that his bones are buried in. Let that sink in. In addition to that, we have another ossuary or bone box that has an inscription written on the side that says, James, the brother of Jesus. And then we have David's palace. It's kind of hard to have a palace if you didn't actually exist. But even with all this evidence, it's amazing that you have people coming out, ex-pastors, and talking about how the people in the Bible didn't exist and there's no evidence for the Bible. And we've given you several examples of how that's absolute nonsense and that there's plenty of evidence that shows that the people in the Bible actually did live. When you have people like Kevin Wesley that come out and say things like that, the immediate perception of people is that, hey, this guy used to be a pastor. So he obviously knows what he's talking about.
I'm going to stop there for a second. So we see that he's mentioning other people calling him out. I mean, not calling him out. I mean, he's calling other people out. But really exposing the fact that the Bible does not have hardcore evidence that people are looking for. And the thing is, historians talk about that the kingdom of David and Solomon was actually not that major. It was like a tribe, if you will. And even if they did exist, which that would not actually be a big deal, because that wouldn't prove that the God narrated in there is true either. Because here's the thing. Many talk about that the city of Troy was found. Does that mean that the Greek creation myths have hold any validity to them? No. No, it doesn't. So that's the problem. You can find historical things and many myths, but it doesn't prove that the divine part of the story has any validity to them. Do you get my point?
Yes.
Is there anything you want to say before we continue?
Oh no, you can go ahead.
All right.
Obviously, he studied the entire Bible and knows everything that there is to know about Scripture.
Also, Delilah ended up being another one of Saul's wives.
Okay, anyway, we also have the Prism of Sennacherib that mentions King Hezekiah by name. We also have the discovery of the Pool of Siloam, where, according to the Gospels, Jesus healed a man that had been paralyzed his entire life. Well,
okay. You want to talk about Jesus? Let's talk about Jesus. How about King James Version, Revelations 22, chapter 22, verse 16. And this is what it says. It says, I, Jesus, have sent mine angel to testify unto you these things in the churches. I am the root and the offspring of David and the bright and morning star. Okay, I don't know how he can be the son of David and the morning star at the same time. That's weird. But we also know the morning star is usually associated with Hallel, whom has been translated into Latin using the word Lucifer. So would you agree with me that verse actually contradicts the idea that Jesus is God, but as well as contradicting the idea that Jesus is the Son of God?
Yes.
It shows that neither, according to that verse, neither is true. So, he can make fun of other people all he wants and talk about, oh, there's evidence for this, evidence for that. But at the same time, look at these contradictions that's right in front of your face. How about, let me take this the extra mile. People say God doesn't have a parent, doesn't have a father. Well, you're in for a surprise, whoever thinks that. Let's just take a read. The Tanakh Stone Edition, Deuteronomy, chapter 32, verses 8 and 9. When the Supreme One gave the nations their inheritance, when he separated the children of man, he set the borders of the peoples according to the number of the children of Israel. For Hashem's portion is his people, Jacob is the measure of his inheritance. Hashem is the name that it's, in this case, that's referring to God. That's what this version uses. Do you see a problem in that verse? He's inheriting Israel from the God.
Yeah, because when you look at the word inheritance, that means you're giving it from you're receiving it from somebody else.
Oh yeah.
That came before you.
Let's see here. Just give me a second. I'm going to open the King James Version now of Deuteronomy chapter 32, verses 8 and 9. It's pretty much the same as the other one, mostly. Let's see. Deuteronomy chapter 32, verses 8 and 9, King James Version. When the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. For the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. Again, just like before, just like in the other version, he's receiving an inheritance. So, here's another issue. If you look at the ancient Semitic religion, as it's called, which is a religion that refers to back to the time period that the Israelites were polytheists, they had many gods. El Elyon was the supreme God. In fact, the very Hebrew terms El Elyon means supreme God. Elyon means supreme, and El means God. So God supreme, which is El Elyon. And he's supreme over the Jewish God, Adonai, which is the Lord in the English. Now, if you look at the word Yahweh, it was invented not even 2 centuries ago, almost 2 centuries ago by Wilhelm Gesenius. He was translating it into Latin. It's got nothing to do with the Hebrew. It wasn't even in Hebrew. You get my point?
Yes.
It's not ancient at all. The Jews usually refer to God as Adonai, but God does not never had one specific name in Judaism. He always has many, 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 many names. It's not one name. If you're going to say God has a real name, that's silly. It doesn't work that way. And anyway, let's continue and see what else this guy's saying.
If all of this knowledge, if all of this information is out there, why is nobody teaching it? It's not like there's some ancient, invisible, supernatural, malevolent force trying to keep people from knowing the truth. Right? So yes, the people in the Bible did exist. David did exist. There's a mention from outside of the Bible of the house of David, his family line. Solomon existed. We have evidence of these people.
Sylvester, can you hear me? Sylvester? Can you hear me?
Hear me?
All right.
Yes, I'm here. Is our video still live or?
Yeah. I'm a little surprised it is because there was a desync. But anyway, let's finish this video.
We have documentation straight from the source, written in stone, as they like to say. We have the buildings, we have the monuments that are being discovered more and more. So what do we do with all this information? Now, I'm not expecting you to take this news and then decide to believe that there was a man 2,000 years ago from Galilee that walked on water and broke bread and fed thousands of people. But what I am saying is that if they were wrong about the people in the Bible not existing, what else could they have been wrong about? If the people in the Bible really did live, if these were really people just like you and I, real figures in history that walked and breathed and lived and experienced humanity just like us, then maybe we should take a second look at Jesus and who he is, what he means to us. Thank you guys so much once again for joining me and watching this video. I hope it's been a blessing to you and has added value and has been informative. If you like what you heard in this video, go ahead and hit that like button below and subscribe so we can keep you guys posted on projects and things we have coming up in the future. And also, last but not least, a great big thank you to all of those who have stopped by to consider praying and supporting us through our Patreon page. We truly appreciate you guys. Your support is absolutely priceless, and I just pray God's blessing on you beyond measure. So, I love you guys. I look forward to talking to you again soon. Please feel free to leave a comment below, shoot me an inbox, and I'll get to it and answer you as soon as humanly possible, and look forward to the discussion. God bless. What's up?
Is there anything that you want to talk about before we close out? Sylvester, can you
I
hear
feel
me?
like he was only. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. What I was gonna say was, I feel like he's only mentioning certain people in the Bible. Like, what about Noah? What about Abraham? What about Isaac, Jacob? What about Adam and Eve? He doesn't touch on those people at all. I noticed.
Yeah.
He doesn't touch on the flood story. You know, all the people got flooded, right? You would think that you would have evidence of the people that got swept in the flood. He doesn't mention the people in Sodom and Gomorrah who were obviously were struck by fire. There's no evidence of that. He doesn't mention what else I'm trying to think of. Yeah, he doesn't really mention those stories at all.
No, he doesn't. Well, like I said before, I'll say it again. When it comes to these mythological stories, yes, they have historical elements in there. They usually do. But at the end of the day, it doesn't prove the point it's trying to make. And that's what people fail to recognize, especially the religious adherents to whatever scripture they're adhering to. Well, is there anything else that you want to say before I close out? Before we close out?
I think that should be good.